Hi, welcome back to Kalike. Here in this video, we are going to straight away dig into Gauss's law. So we are going to state Gauss's law and understand what Gauss's law actually means to you physically. Apart from that, we will take all the applications of Gauss law all at once in this class, so that will conclude your very first chapter in electrostatic, which is electric charges and fields. This is very much important from your examination point of view, board examination point of view, as well as conceptual point of view, where you will get to understand a bit more about surface charge density, electric flux, and also the expression for electric field. Without wasting any time, let's straight away dig into it. Well, now to define or understand Gauss law, before making straight away, before making a statement on the Gauss law, what actually the Gauss law states, because it's a very important question. So we will derive it and then arrive at the expression for the Gauss law. We'll first try to understand. So basically, you know what is electric flux? Electric flux is the number of lines crossing a given cross-sectional area, given unit cross-sectional area, right? So let us imagine you have, a positive charge somewhere here. So this is the positive charge Q. Now you see, how will the electric flux lines be pointing? They will point radially outwards from this, because if any point charge P kept here, which point charge is a test charge, will experience an electric field and hence also the force only in this direction. So the electric flux lines basically give you the direction of force or the electric field experienced by any charge placed at any point P. So anywhere you keep, see, you can draw infinitesimally large number of electric field lines, or so this we have already discussed in detail in the previous class. So you can draw as many as possible even in between these gaps. So right, for simplicity here I am drawing only few. I'm drawing some more here. So if you take any, if you take some cross sectional area, if this is a unit area, the number of lines crossing here, like 1 2 3 4 5 6. So here the electric flux in this area becomes 6. So if you imagine, there are several large areas right around everywhere. So you have some more area here, some more area here. You take another cross sectional area here, another cross sectional area here, another, and draw the number of electric field lines and measure, you see, and add all of them. That gives you the net flux, right? The net flux, and through that you can even calculate the electric field. It is definitely proportional to the electric field. It's the electric field is radially outward. It is going to be proportional at a certain distance. So if imagine, if this is the center O, where you are placed, where you see there is a source charge Q placed, and this, the distance between the source charge and the point P where you place the test charge is R. So imagine you draw a spherical shell. Imagine you draw, you have a football. So you imagine a football, okay, and you imagine that football encloses the positive charge. Okay, that's an imaginary sphere. Okay, so that imaginary sphere is what we call the Gaussian surface. So what did Gauss do? Gauss basically assumed that, in order to calculate the total electric flux at any given point, right, the net electric flux, let us imagine a Gaussian sphere which is symmetric in shape. So here I am taking, for simplicity, the basic symmetric shape that we can take is a spherical shape, because a spherical shape is radially symmetric all over, and you have all these electric flux lines coming out radially through each surface. So you imagine this entire surface. If I have to draw it two-dimensionally, how would it look like? So this is your point charge Q, right, which is your source charge placed at the point O. Now these are your field lines, right? You imagine a Gaussian sphere. So this is so imagine you have a point P here where you have kept your test charge plus Q. Now you imagine this spherical surface. So it looks like a circle because I'm drawing it two-dimensionally, but you are imagining a spherical surface coming out of the board and going into the board. So this surface which we imagine, where we say this charge Q is enclosed in this imaginary surface, right? We are assuming, it's an assumption that we are making, this surface does not exist. Why are we making this assumption? In order to calculate, in order to make our mathematical calculations easy. So physics is all about making assumptions and arriving at the right answer. That is how it is done. So therefore, you imagine this spherical surface around this point charge, which is placed at the center. This doesn't look like the center, but imagine this to be the center. So the point P is at a distance r. Now on the spherical surface, you imagine tiny unit cross-sectional area. So here you imagine a cross-sectional area such that this will be the direction of the electric field. Also, what will be the direction of the area vector? The area vector will also point in this in the same direction. So you can call the area vector as n cap, the normal, or you can also call it as, since it is here, you can also call it as S cap. Okay, so generally we call the area vector, it is the normal, so n cap, right? Now, if I have to calculate the electric flux, so if I have to calculate the electric flux through this, you see that what is the angle between the electric field and the normal? They make an angle. In general, we know that flux, what is the definition of flux? We have already learned this. We have derived it in the previous class. So electric flux is given by the dot product of the electric field plus the, into the area vector, right? So these are the dot product. You see that what is the angle between these two? The angle between these two is 0. So since this is a dot product, we write it as E delta S cos theta. What is the value of cos theta here? It is 0. So the flux here in this, for this particular element, it is going to be E into delta S. Imagine what will be the total electric flux. So you imagine so many other, unit area cross-sectional area, and everywhere you see that it will be E delta S, E delta S1, E delta S2, E delta S3. So the electric field is uniform, right? The point charge at a distance r, everywhere it is going to be uniform. We know that, we have already studied that. Therefore, the net electric flux will be equal to simply, it can be written as E delta S1 plus E delta S2, etc., 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 up to E delta Sn. In other words, you can simply write it as, it is E electric field into sigma I is equal to 1 to n. It can take values from anywhere, delta S, right? Now, what is E? We know that what is for a point charge, what will be the electric field? The electric field is given by the expression 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. What is the charge that is producing the field? It is Q. But what distance are you finding the, the electric field? We are finding it at a distance R to a point P from the center O. So there are so many point P's, P1, P2, P3, P4, P5, which all make up this area, multiplied by this area. So if you add all of this, it's a sphere. If you add the entire surface area, what is the area of a sphere? This is the area of a sphere, the entire area of a sphere, the ball coming out of the board and going into the board. So basically it is the surface area of a sphere. So if it is the surface area of a sphere, the surface area of a sphere is given by 4 pi r square. So 4 pi gets cancelled, r square gets cancelled. What remains is the net flux is given by, what is remaining? Q divided by epsilon naught. So here comes the statement of Gauss law. This is the expression of Gauss law. So it is pi Q by epsilon naught. 4 pi got cancelled, r square got cancelled. How did you get this 4 pi r square? It is, you are taking the surface area, because you are dividing the entire spherical shell into equal tiny small areas. There will be other spherical areas as well, because if this is coming out of the board, I am assuming spherical, small cross-sectional area here, small cross-sectional, I am adding all those area. Also something goes into the board, on the surface, below the surface, everywhere the angle between the electric field and the normal, to the surface area makes an angle 0. So we know it's a sphere. When we know it's a sphere, we know by geometry, the area of the sphere is 4 pi r square. What is r? R is the radius of the imaginary sphere, which we call the Gaussian surface. Why are we imagining it? Because we want to make our mathematical calculations easy, and we are generally assuming a shape which has a symmetry, and sphere has the best symmetry. So that will not complicate our mathematical problems, and it will help us arrive at our physical relations very easily. So therefore, it will help us understand the physical significance easily. Therefore, we assume it to be a spherical shape. It's an imaginary spherical shape. It doesn't exist in reality. Always remember it. So this is called a Gaussian surface. A Gaussian surface always has symmetry, and Generally we assume it to be symmetrical, which makes our calculations easy. It's imaginary, it's not real. The charge is not enclosed because the charge never resides inside a conductor, but here we are assuming it to be inside. This is an imaginary sphere coming out of the board, imaginary sphere going into the part of it outside of the board, part of it inside of the board. And what else did we do? We knew that by definition flux is equal to the dot product of electric field and the surface area. The angle that the electric field makes with the normal to the surface area is 0. They are parallel to each other, so cos 0 is 1, so maximum flux flows through this. So what will be the net electric flux? So if you have that football coming out of the board, that imaginary football which we call the Gaussian surface, where we assume this point charge to be placed inside the surface, you see that this has been divided into so many small surface areas. They're all unit cross-sectional surface areas. So on, and if you start summing up all of them, instead of summing up all of them, we know that the area of a sphere is given by 4 pi r square, where r is the distance between the two charges, the source charge and the test charge. So we are assuming the test, we'll assume the test charge was initially placed here. We calculate the electric field experienced by the test charge here, and then here, and then here. You can't go on doing multiple calculations because you assume the entire imaginary sphere to be divided into thousands and thousands of cross-sectional areas. So you can't just go on summing it up. So by symmetry, if what will happen if I take any random shape instead of a sphere, if I take any random shape instead of a sphere, the problem that arises is in calculating the total surface area. Because if I take a random shape, I will have to, calculate cross-sectional area for every, imagine, if the same thing, if I had kept this and I assume it was this to be the Gaussian sphere. Now, how will I calculate the area? So I will have to probably, calculate every. So it is not, the shape is not the same. I cannot simply write the total surface area of the value to be equal to 4 pi r square. Why did you choose it to be spherical? Because I know a sphere has a symmetry, and it just simplifies my calculation, allows me to arrive at the required expression very easily, which matches exactly with the experimental values that you find out. So therefore, theoretically what we do is we do minimal. We do not want to make it more complex, so we assume a very spherical symmetry. We have assumed a symmetrical shape. The best symmetrical shape for a point charge you can assume is always a sphere, remember. So I assumed a sphere because I know the total surface area of the sphere. If I assumed the imaginary Gaussian surface, which encloses this charge, to be any random shape, I do not know how to calculate, right? I'll have to do complex mathematics and arrive at the expression for the total surface area of this, which will make my problem more complicated, because it is not just one surface area, two surface area, three. You are not summing up 4 or 5 surface areas. You have to sum up thousands of surface areas, because you are dividing them into very, very tiny pieces of surface areas, and you are summing them up. So that if you have a symmetrical shape, you already have a formula known, you have learnt it, you know there is proof that this is the surface area. It is easy for calculation. So therefore, we assume it to be a sphere and we write it as 4 pi square. What is E? E is the electric field experienced at the point P. So everywhere it experiences the same field. Why does it experience the same field? Because it is the same charge that is producing the field, and at every point, since it is a sphere, the very important point, see, if you assume it to be any random shape like this, then you see that the point P will be closer here. So the electric field here, if I call it as E4, and the electric field here at a point P1, and this is a point P4, will not be same. Here the electric field value also I'll have to calculate, because this distance between the source charge and the point charge is different. This distance between the source charge and the point charge is different. So you are unnecessarily complicating the problem by assuming a random Gaussian surface. So what is the best way to do? Imagine a surface which has a symmetry. So therefore you simplify your calculation. So see, we solved two problems. We did not, we had a direct formula for the total surface area of a sphere, and since it was a sphere, everywhere the distance between the point charge, no matter where I keep it on the circumference of the sphere, the electric field turns out to be same because it has a symmetry. The distance between the point charge anywhere on any cross-sectional area of the sphere will be r, and also the magnitude of the charge is also same, so it will experience the same electric field. The magnitude of the field and even the direction of the field also matters because it's a vector. So here you will be here you will be messing it up, because not only the magnitude, the direction of the electric field might also change if you take any random shape. To simplify such calculations, always choose your Gaussian surface. What is a Gaussian surface? It's a surface that we imagine around a charge, any given charge. Why are we assuming it? Because we want to calculate the total net flux. One in one random. See, why are we basically doing all this? What is the purpose? Why are we calculating all this net flux? The basic purpose is, if I take a charge, imagine this is a charge, it is placed somewhere here in a particular circumference. I want to know how many electric field lines can pass through. I want to know that number. How do you know that number? In order to know that number, I imagine this charge. If this is the source charge, I imagine this is enclosed in a sphere of football. I imagine a football around it, and everywhere I take a small cross-sectional area on the surface, and I see the direction of the electric field, and hence the direction of the surface area vector are aligned, and the angle between them is 0, simplifying my calculations, making my calculations of electric field also easy, because the magnitude and direction also remains the same. So we arrive at an expression called the total electric flux will be equal to 1 upon epsilon naught times the charge enclosed by the Gaussian surface. Okay, so what does Gauss's law state? Simple. Gauss's law states that the net electric flux enclosed by any Gaussian surface. Why enclosed by a Gaussian surface? We know charge doesn't reside inside a conductor. No, there will be charges, but generally charge finally settles down on the surface of the conductor. Of course, there will be nucleus, atom, there will be, but they generally reside on the surface. So always know, never misunderstand. How can you say you are contradicting your own statement? Earlier in your earlier classes, you said, charge can never stay inside a conductor, right? Field inside a conductor is always 0. Now you are assuming a charge to stay inside a conductor. You are assuming a spherical shell. No, this spherical shell is imaginary only for my mathematical calculation, and that imaginary sphere or that imaginary symmetrical shape surface is what is referred to as the Gaussian sphere, and this is known as the center of that imaginary Gaussian surface. And these assumptions are done only to arrive at the total electric flux. So what does Gauss law state? The total electric flux, right? The total electric flux due to a charge enclosed in a Gaussian surface is given by 1 by epsilon naught times the total charge enclosed in that surface. So it's as simple as that. So if you know the formula, if you understand the concept well, if you understand why we are doing all this, why are we imagining a surface, I hope it is clear. If you have any doubts, again, you can always ping in the comments. I'm happy to do it more elaborately if required. If someone has any doubts or concerns or whatsoever, we can do it more elaborately, but by now I feel most of you might have understood. If not, you can always come back with comments, and I'm more than happy to answer it. Well, now there is a very important question I must ask you. Suppose for the same point charge that we assumed, instead of assuming a spherical imaginary Gaussian surface, if I had imagined some other symmetrical surface, let's say I imagine that point charge to lie inside a cylindrical shape, what will happen to the net flux? Let's try and find out. So suppose if the same charge was assumed, I assume it was a place, because cylinder also has some symmetry, right? I mean, it's basically a rectangular shape and you have two circles at the ends, right? So therefore, now if I had imagined it to be enclosed in such a thing, what will happen? So let's first write the lines of force. So these will be the lines of force pointing radially outward. So any point charge P placed at such a point will experience a force, and hence the electric field in these directions radially outward, right? So now, so these are the directions of the electric field. Now here you see the direction of the area vector is also in the same direction, because it's a circular shape, right? So here also it is in the same direction. The electric field is in this direction, opposite. They're both opposite, right? What will happen here? Here you have to divide. So if I imagine this entire thing to be one spherical surface, or you divide it into unit cross sectional area here, right? Here there will be hundreds of cross-sectional area and you sum them up, you see that they point out in this downward direction, right? So they point out, I mean, it is, if I had, okay, this looks like a cylinder. Let me grab a big chalk. Okay, so if you imagine, okay, even this, you can, if you imagine, see, you see, these are the, this is cylindrical in shape, these are those spheres. So here, both the area vector and, the electric field are parallel to each other. The angle between them is 0. For this surface, how do you find? For, they are all tilted. So here it could be pointing in this direction, 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 pointing in this direction. So the electric field lines are perpendicular to it. So the electric field, if the charge is placed inside this, the electric field line is in this direction. So this is the direction of the electric field, whereas the area vector will be in this direction. So the angle between them, this will be the area vector at this curve. So the entire curved surface, if I take it to be one single surface, you see that it is pointing towards you, right? The area vector is pointing towards you. It is looking towards you. So this is the angle that it makes if I place it here. So the angle between them is 90 degrees. So how much is cos 90? Cos 90 is 0. So due to this curved surface, no electric field lines actually come out of it. Okay. So you see that no electric field lines come out of it. So what will happen here, through the surface, the angle between the electric field and the surface area vector will be E delta S cos 90, which will be 0. Now, due to this, let's calculate. So, the flux comes out only through the surface area 1 and surface area 2. So, the net flux will be due to phi 1 for surface area 1 and surface area 2. If you are adding the vector, so it is E delta S, E dot delta S, it is in the opposite direction. Therefore, if I am writing the direction, it will be minus E dot delta S. Why minus? Because they are pointing in opposite direction. The number of field lines here, the number of field lines here. So, I mean, they cancel out each other. So, the net flux becomes 0. So, these cases, if you assume, see, depending on this symmetry, depending on the shape, the Gaussian shape that you select, you will end up, calculating the electric flux through a surface. I hope it was clear. If you have any doubts, we can discuss it. We'll discuss it further. You can leave the comments and I'm more than happy to answer. Okay, so what does this tell you? Now, were we correct in our explanation? So I told you that, the net flux turns out to be 0. There will be, some, leaving here through this, this entire, if I take that chalk again, the long chalk, you see that this is the cylindrical surface area. You saw that the area vector in some, it will make perpendicular angle. If I take a area vector on top here, it will be aligned with the electric field. So there will be definitely some points where you get the flux, where you can calculate some flux. So not all area elements. So if you take some area element, these will be pointing in this direction, right? This will point in this direction. The electric field is pointing radially outward. They might be perpendicular. So in some directions, if I assume, they might be parallel to each other. They might be in the same direction. So it all depends on the angle between the area vector and the electric field. So this contradicts Gauss law. So where, for the same point charge where we had assumed a spherical Gaussian surface, you got the expression for the total electric flux to be Q by epsilon naught. This stands clear irrespective of the surface you choose, irrespective of a symmetrical shape like a sphere, a cylinder, or anything else, or even any random shape you choose. This should be the total flux through a given point charge, assuming to be enclosed in any kind of shape. Here, ending up straight away saying that this to be 0 is not right, because this is correct, because here, one is in this direction, another is in opposite direction. They're equal, they are equidistant from this point. Therefore, the electric field cancels. But what happens through this curved surface area? Through this, imagine, this is coming out and also it is inside the board, right? If you assume this chalk, if this chalk if it is a bigger chalk which is in the form of a cylinder, it is half of it is inside the board, half of it is coming down, half of the curved surface is coming out of the board. So here there will be area vector here the area vector will be like this. So it certainly at some point it certainly makes some angle with the electric field vector. So in such cases, when you add them, you find out it doesn't turn out to be 0. In fact, it turns out to be Q by epsilon naught. I hope some of you were able to catch this mistake and say, oh yes, how can it be 0? How can Gauss law be so inconsistent? We have studied it. No, it is not inconsistent. It does not depend on the shape. The Gauss law is consistent for any shape that you assume. Only symmetrical shapes make your calculations easy. Asymmetrical shapes make your calculations a bit difficult. But even for the cylinder, you see when you add up all the elements on the flat surface, some of the area vectors make certain angles with the electric field, and you at the end, if you add all of them, it turns out to be Q by epsilon naught. So Gaussian law or Gauss's law is same and consistent for any shape that you choose, where any shape you choose that the charge is enclosed in. It is always given by 1 by epsilon naught times Q. Now it's time to take some applications and understand the Gauss law a little bit more and arrive at the expressions. These are very important from your board examination point of view, and I want you to pay complete attention here. Well, here we are calculating or arriving at the expression for the electric field. The very first application, according to your NCERT book, if we go by your NCERT book, it's a very important expression where we arrive at the electric field due to an infinitely long, straight, uniformly charged wire. So that wire is, in order to simplify the calculations, we are making an assumption of the charge, the wire being uniformly charged, the electric field at every point. If you take any point at the same distance, you get the same value of the electric field. We do not want to complicate the problems, and we are assuming the wire to be infinitely long. It is infinitely long. It's another assumption that we make. Infinity is something that we can't imagine, but yes, here we are assuming it to be infinitely long and it is uniformly charged. So what does that have to mean when you write it diagrammatically? It looks something like this. So I cannot write an infinitely long wires, which means it extends beyond the board, beyond this room, beyond beyond the sky. So we assume it to be uniformly charged. Preferably we are talking only about positive charges, and we know the field due to these charges is radially outward. This I have discussed very much clearly, but I want to discuss it again. So imagine this is the point P, and through the point P I draw a circle or a sphere. I assume a spherical Gaussian surface. So here it is of the same radius. Let's say it is at a distance r, this point from the point this charge. So you see, how do you draw your electric field lines? Your electric field lines will be radially outward like this. So electric field lines will be radially outward. This will be same in length because it's a sphere. You are imagining a sphere or a circular surface, and it has to be same, but I cannot draw it on the board due to the restrictions that we have on space and a lot of other things. But you imagine everywhere, the length of the electric field lines is same. It has to be same because the point P. So anywhere here, if you keep the test charge, it will experience the same force. If you keep it here, if you keep it here, everywhere the distances are only. I cannot show it on the board for some reason, right? So P5, P6, anywhere on the sphere, you see that it experiences the same field. That is why we say it is uniformly charged. So similarly, you assume this infinite long wire to be divided into such cross-sectional areas. Everywhere you see it is radially pointing outward, and it is also experiencing force of repulsion. So this charge wants to go away from this charge. This charge wants to go away from this charge because like charges repel. They don't want to be close to each other. Somehow they settle apart. So there is repulsion on everywhere. And what happens to this charge? Here we have seen here, if you take this point, you will not find it. This charge at the end of the wire, that is why we have assumed it to be infinitely long. If it were finite, then what will happen? For the same for the same cross-sectional area, you see this charge don't want to settle down. It just wants to go out of the wire. So if you connect it to the earth, you see that it will more electrons will flow and this positive charge goes away, and electrons will get attracted if this is grounded. If you connect it to earth, if you connect it to earth, that is what is going to happen. If not, if I write that circular, if you assume there is a sphere around the spherical shape, so how they want to go out, this charge wants to go out, so most of them are clubbed here because the charge wants to go out. It cannot have in this direction because this is also repelling, this is also repelling. You see that there is a greater force of repulsion, every charge wants to repel. So this is how it actually happens inside an infinitely long thin wire which is uniformly charged. And this we have discussed in detail even in my previous class. I have done it, but here when you come, so this is the physical part. I hope you have understood. If you have any doubts or concerns, you can always write in the comments. I'm more than happy to make a separate video on that. I hope this is clear. So what I'm writing is, I'll show you again. So you are assuming that, everywhere it is the same. So it is radially outward, radially. So here you see that they want to go away, they just want to go away from each other. That is why they are saying infinitely long, because there is repulsion. They all want to go away from each other. It is infinitely long. They don't want to stay together, right? Now, if you have to arrive at the expression for the electric field, due to this infinitely long wire, using Gauss law, right? We are using Gauss law and also Coulomb's law to arrive at that expression. How do we club them together? To club them together, obviously, if you are using Gauss law, you will have to imagine a Gaussian surface. So should I imagine a sphere around each of these and calculate? No. What shape does this wire look like? It looks like it is in the shape of a cylinder. So the best symmetrical shape we can assume here is a cylinder. We also know what is the area of a cylinder, the surface area of a cylinder. So let's assume a cylinder. So this is the imaginary surface. I assume that this wire, infinitely thin long wire, was placed in a cylindrically shaped Gaussian surface. So consider a cylindrically shaped Gaussian surface, right, of length L. So this is the length L. Okay, you imagine, and you see the electric field is in this direction. Show the direction of the electric. Imagine a point P at a distance R, right? So here again, you can imagine this to be divided into lots of spherical shape and you can calculate, right? So the electric field lines are radially outward. So what should be your first sentence that you're going to write? The first sentence that you're going to write is, consider a cylindrical Gaussian surface of length L and let the surface charge density. What is surface charge density? We have read this in detail in one of our videos. So the surface charge density of this long thin wire, let us assume it to be lambda. Let me call this as lambda. What is surface charge density? Surface charge density is charge per unit length of the wire, right? So this is the definition. So this also implies Q can be written as lambda into L. You can just cross multiply and write it as Q is equal to lambda into L, where lambda is the surface charge density. So per unit length of the wire, what is the amount of charge accumulated? Per unit length of the wire, you count the number of charges and that becomes the density of charges per unit length of the wire, assuming it to be divided into infinitesimally small unit lengths, a meter or a centimeter or a millimeter or even less than that. You basically take a unit length for simpler calculations, right? So this is first thing. So first sentence is, consider a cylindrical Gaussian surface, or consider the infinitely thin long wire with uniform charge density lambda. I repeat, consider a imaginary cylindrical. So what is the Gaussian surface? So you have to write, consider a imaginary cylindrical shaped, okay, imaginary cylindrical shaped Gaussian surface enclosing, so it is enclosing the infinitely long thin wire. So you have to write all that, infinitely long thin wire of uniform surface charge density, okay, uniform surface charge density lambda. Okay, and then from here you go to this expression. Therefore, surface charge density is given by Q by L, and Q is equal to lambda L. Again, I repeat. So, what is your first sentence? Consider an imaginary cylindrical Gaussian surface enclosing the infinitely long thin straight wire with uniform charge density lambda, where lambda is given by Q by L. In other words, you can mathematically write it as charge is equal to Q is equal to lambda into L. That is the first step. After that, now we will use Gauss law and we will also use Coulomb's law to arrive at our expression. Well, now I see I erased that part. We should have retained it, but I want to write it in very small. This was the Gaussian surface you imagined, right? You have to write it in dotted lines because it is an imaginary surface, and this is your infinitely long thin wire with uniform surface charge density, right? And you assumed a point P at a distance R on this imaginary surface. Now, what are you supposed to write? So now, due to this cylindrical shape, you see that this spherical shape has electric, they are radially outward. I told you here at this corner, I mean, of course, it is infinitely long. The cylinder also, the imaginary cylinder has to be infinitely long. At this edges, you see that they become radially outward. There will be hardly any lines pointing in this direction because it wants to go away and away from the other positive charge due to forces of repulsion. The repulsive forces are really strong forces. So therefore, you call this effect as curling effect or fringing effect. We have discussed in very much detail in one of my previous videos. So you can watch more there. If not, here also, I mean, this is enough for you to understand. So you see that there, this will be the direction of the electric field. They'll be radially outwards, and here the surface area is also in the same, same direction. Okay, it is even here it will be radially outward, right, from this area. So it is going to be radially outward like this. So this is the direction of the electric field. This will be the direction of the area vector, the circular area vector, the ends, but they are in opposite direction. So what will be the flux due to these two? Flux due to the flux, you can write flux due to the ends of the cylinder, Gaussian cylinder. You can write it, G has to be capital due to the Gaussian because it's a noun. Gaussian cylinder are equal and opposite. They are going to be equal, and you see they are in opposite direction, right? Equal and opposite. Hence, so what does this imply? The total flux through those surface is 0. So what is the flux that contributes to the electric field? It is only due to this curved surface. So the total flux is the contribution. Flux total is only equal due to the surface area is contributed only by the surface area of the curved surface, curved cylindrical shape, right? So that is the only contribution, right? So flux by Gauss's law is given by Q divided by epsilon naught, and the surface the total flux is given by always given by Q by epsilon naught, and this is also equal to the flux of what? You get the flux only through the surface area of the curved surface cylinder. So flux is given by E dot delta S, right? And they are in the same direction, radially outward. The area direction is also the same. The electric field direction is also the same. So it is basically E delta S cos theta, or you can just write it as cos theta is cos 0 because the angle between them is 0. They both point in the same direction. Okay, now we will write what is the total flux according to Gauss law given by, it is Q by epsilon naught. So E we will retain as such because we are arriving at the expression for electric field only. We will not write the values of E. We will not write an expression for E because we have to arrive at the expression for E. Delta S is the area. So area is given of that curved surface. Only the curved surface is given by 2 pi RL. So how did you get this E delta S? E delta S was cos 0 degrees. So cos 0 is 1. Therefore, I wrote it as E into delta S. Now what are we going to do? What is Q equal to? Q is equal to lambda L. So let's substitute that. So if I substitute, let me substitute it here. Q is lambda L divided by epsilon naught. A is equal to E into 2 pi RL. So if I bring that 2 pi RL down, 2 pi RL down, that becomes your E. So what gets cancelled? L and L gets cancelled. What are you left with? This gives you the expression for the electric field for an infinitely long, thin, uniformly charged wire. It is given by 1 by, not 1 by, lambda divided by 2 pi epsilon naught R. So that is the expression for the electric field due to an infinitely long, thin, uniformly charged wire. I hope it was clear. So only assumption. So how do you basically start the entire derivation? We say consider a cylindrically shaped, imaginary cylindrically shaped Gaussian surface enclosing the infinitely long straight uniformly charged wire of surface charge density lambda. We know that lambda is given by Q divided by L. So therefore Q is equal to lambda into L. What is the next point that you are going to write? Flux due to the ends of the Gaussian cylinder are equal and opposite, hence the flux through them is zero. So the flux only comes from the curved surface part of the cylinder. Therefore, by Gauss law, the total flux is equal to flux of the surface flux through the surface area of only the curved part, right? So flux by Gauss law is given by Q by epsilon naught, and flux by definition is area into electric field into dot product of electric field and the surface area. So what surface area are we talking about? What is the angle between the electric field and the curved surface area? They are parallel to each other. The angle between them is 0. So cos 0 is 1. Why is it cos 0? Because it's a dot product. When you have a dot product, you write it as a cosine angle between them. So therefore E delta. So what is the area of that curved surface? Substitute, retain E as such, because you are finding the expression for E. It will be 2 pi RL. This is something you must remember. If you forget, you cannot do the derivation at all. So now what do? You bring this 2 pi RL down here and cancel length and length in the denominator and the numerator, and you finally arrive at the expression for the electric field, which is lambda divided by 2 pi epsilon naught R. So this is something it should be there in the mouth. It should be registered here because you get a plenty of numericals, 2 mark, 3 mark. It can be, I mean, even for entrance examinations. I hope this part was clear. Let's take another application. Now we are calculating or arriving at the expression for the electric field due to a uniformly charged, infinitely long, it has to be infinite plane sheet or infinitely long plane sheet. So how does it look? It's a metal sheet. Imagine there is a metal sheet, some of which is gone into the board infinitely long and some of which is coming out of the board infinitely long. So suppose this is the charge, right? Now, what should be the Gaussian surface that I should imagine? Something that is rectangular. This metal sheet is also rectangular. So I will imagine a rectangularly parallelepiped. So how does it look like? Let me draw it for you. So rectangular parallelepiped looks something like this. Okay, it looks something like this. So you are assuming it to be enclosed like this. I hope it is clear. So it is rectangular in shape. Okay, you are assuming this metal sheet to be enclosed. So this is also infinitely long, right? Now we have to calculate the flux through it. So obviously, what will be the direction of the electric field? The direction of the electric field will be in this direction, right? In a metal sheet is here. Okay, it depends on how you place it. If you place it, here what will be the direction of the area vector? This will be the direction of the area vector. This will be the direction of area vector. Here they are equal and opposite. So the flux due to this and flux due to phases 1 and 2, they do cancel, right? So first of all, how do you start the derivation? Okay, now first thing is, Obviously, just like the earlier one, we will say consider an imaginary, okay, so this is how you are going to write. Consider an imaginary Gaussian surface parallel, let's call parallelopiped Gaussian surface. Okay, what is this Gaussian surface enclosing? It is enclosing an infinite uniformly charged infinite plane sheet, enclosing a uniformly charged plane sheet of surface charge density so here we will call the surface charge density as sigma, right? This I have discussed, we have done the derivations, I have discussed in very much detail. Now surface charge density is given by Q divided by areal density. So Q divided by surface area per unit area of the given surface. If you divide it into infinitesimally small areas, so what is the charge stored in each small area, that gives you the surface charge density. This also implies Q is equal to sigma A. So similar, we are going in a similar pattern. This is how we started our previous explanation of the entire derivation. So what was the second part we did? We said due to this and this, they are equal in opposite, therefore the flux due to those opposite phases 1 and 2 cancel each other and they do not add up to the total flux, right? So that is the second part here as well. Due to this rectangular end and due to this rectangular end, let's name them as 1 and 2. So due to the opposite rectangle, since phases 1 and 2 are equal and opposite, the flux through the total flux will cancel out. The total flux through them cancels out. Okay, so what is the only flux that contributes? Just like the this surface, that part of the cylindrical surface that we did here, it is this part which is both the electric field direction which is radially outward, this direction it will cancel. There will be some, because there will be all random directions, right? So everyone will have it will be radially outward, and so what will happen, these add up, the rest wherever it is perpendicular they obviously cancel out, they contribute here, right? They contribute in this direction, they cancel out. Whatever contributes in this direction, they add up. Whatever contributes in this direction of the area vector, they contribute, because the angle between the area vector and this can be given as E delta S cos 0 degree. Here, even here also it is E delta S cos 0 degree. So what will be the total flux? They add up. The entire surface area adds up. So that will be 2E delta S. Okay. So from there we will do the derivation. I'll rub this part and we will continue. Yeah. So the total flux is only due to what part? Due to the rectangular, you can call those rectangular, the entire rectangular surface. Flux through the opposite rectangular faces. Now, the entire rectangular surface. Okay, so here that will be E delta S plus E delta S. Okay, for simplicity we can call it as EA. Delta S I represent it as area, because here I have area, surface area, right? So that will get cancelled anyway. So I am replacing delta S as A only because I have A here. So that becomes 2EA, right? What is total flux given by? Total flux by Gaussian law is given by Q by epsilon naught. But what is Q? Q is sigma A. So let's replace that. Sigma A divided by epsilon naught. Area gets cancelled. If I had written it at delta S, I wouldn't be able to cancel. So I just replace delta S by A so that my calculation becomes simple. Now what do? You multiply this here. So therefore what is written? Sigma by 2 epsilon naught is what is the electric field due to an uniformly charged infinite plane sheet. If you want to write it in the vector form, you just have to write a vector along with it, the area vector. So 2 epsilon naught and the normal, right? This is how you write it in the vector form. So they are similar. There is no, if you learn one, you make the assumption first, right? You first say you are imagining a Gaussian surface and then you say it has so and so surface charge density, arrive at the expression for Q because we require it here, and then we say due to the opposite faces they cancel out. The only part that contributes is in the cylindrical part, the infinite long wire, it was the curved surface which was 2 pi RL. Here it is the entire rectangular face. They get added up so that it becomes 2EA and A gets cancelled and we end up arriving at sigma divided by 2 epsilon naught. If there it was lambda divided by 2, I think 2 pi epsilon naught, 2 pi epsilon naught R, I guess 2 or 4. So you have to be really sure about it. Learn these things, remember these things, it will be easy. Well, now it's time to arrive at the expression for field due to a uniformly charged thin spherical shell. So it is a thin spherical shell, it is uniformly charged. So you have uniformly charged, okay, it has been uniformly charged, right? So obviously it is going to be radially outward. So you have to calculate the field outside of this shell. So at any point outside of this shell, what is going to be the electric field? So the best thing is we assume a spherical shape. So let us assume a spherical shape outside of the shell. This is going to be, this doesn't look symmetrical. So let's make it look symmetrical. So let this be of radius R somewhere here if you are calculating. This is of radius R. So you see the electric field vector also points in this direction, and the area vector, if you take any area, the area vector also points in the same direction. Delta S also points in the same direction. So let us assume this has a surface charge density sigma. So it is given by Q divided by A. So what is Q divided by, this is a sphere will have charge. What is the radius of the sphere? We have assumed the radius of sphere to be R, small r. So area of the sphere is given by 4 pi r square. So sigma is equal to Q divided by 4 pi r square. If you cross multiply, this will give you Q is equal to sigma into 4 pi r square, right? Why am I using this? Because I will require it to replace Q by when I am writing Gauss law, right? So what is the first thing you are going to write? Consider a imaginary spherical Gaussian surface with radius R, or consider a point P placed on an imaginary spherical Gaussian surface with radius R. So I repeat, you are going to write, what are you going to write? You are first going to talk about the point P where you are calculating the electric field. To calculate the electric field, let us consider a point P on an imaginary spherical Gaussian surface with radius R of surface charge density sigma, which is given by Q divided by A. But for a sphere, you can write this, but for a sphere, what is the area? The area is given by 4 pi r square. So replace area by 4 pi r square. Now cross multiply this here. So charge enclosed will become sigma into 4 pi r square. Now how do you calculate the net flux? The net flux, you see what is the direction, what is the angle between the area vector and the electric field? We see that the angle between the area vector and the electric field is 0. They are parallel to each other. Therefore, the total flux is given by, so what are you going to write? By Gauss law. According to Gauss law, the net flux is given by, so you write a statement saying according to Gauss law, the net flux is given by, what is the definition? By definition of, okay, you can say by definition of flux, we know that flux is given by E dot delta S, right? But E dot delta S, this is sigma, you have to add all the areas, right? So it is for all the surface areas. How all the surface areas? Surface area 1, you are keeping the point P everywhere. All are equidistant. You are from this, all are at a distance R. from the center of the spherical shell. So therefore we write it as E dot delta S. Now E dot delta S, delta, the angle between them is, let's write down, E sigma E delta S cos 0 degree. So that will be equal to, you can write it as sigma E delta S, because cos 0 is 1. But the electric field, the magnitude of electric field is same. So let's write it as, let's calculate the total surface area. The total surface area of a sphere is given by, what is the radius of the sphere? It is capital R. So therefore it will be 4 pi R square. But by Gauss law, what is the net flux given by? The net flux is given by Gauss law, it is Q by epsilon naught. But what is Q? Q is 4 pi R square into sigma whole divided by epsilon naught. So therefore you have E and 4 pi capital R square. What all gets cancelled? 4 pi gets cancelled. So E remains. Bring this R square down. That will be your expression for electric field. Therefore electric field is, what do you have in the numerator? Sigma R square whole divided by R square or sigma epsilon naught R square. Now if you want to write it in the vector format, it has to be n cap. So this is the expression for electric field due to a thin spherical shell outside the shell. So how do you start? I repeat it. First you start by saying, consider a point P on the imaginary spherical Gaussian surface at a distance r from the center of the spherical shell. Let the surface charge density be given by sigma, which is Q by A. But for a sphere, area is given by 4 pi R square. So you cross multiply, find out what is Q. Then write down, the net flux is given by sigma E delta S. The angle between them is 0. Now sum up all the surface area. Surface area of that spherical shell is given by 4 pi capital R square. Next is simple mathematical calculation, bringing it to the denominator and arriving at the expression. As simple as that, easy 5 mark. There is nothing to worry about it. It is just you have to pay attention and understand how it is done. All of them are done in the similar pattern. Well, this is a very interesting derivation, the same part, but now we are assuming the Gaussian sphere to be inside the shell. So this is the shell that we had earlier, and we assume the Gaussian sphere to be outside of this. You know, we imagine that sphere enclosing the spherical shell, but now what you're imagining is, what you're asked to calculate is the field inside the shell. So these are the charges are on the surface of that, sphere, right? The spherical shell. The spherical shell, it's a ball. Now you are imagining the Gaussian surface inside. Okay, let's consider a spherical Gaussian surface of radius r from the center of the spherical shell. Okay, so where is the electric field vector? Electric field vector is in this direction. This is also in this direction, right? So let's write down the total flux. First sentence is, consider an imaginary spherical Gaussian surface of radius r with a surface charge. We can't write a surface charge density because we are only talking about the Gaussian sphere. Now, so therefore, the net flux is given by E into delta S. Okay. Now they make an angle 0. Okay, fine, perfectly. So it will be E sigma. You can write it as just like that. Sigma. Write sigma here because you have to sum up the entire area. So E delta S. So that will be E into sigma delta S. What is the area of the sphere, the Gaussian sphere? It is given by, it is of radius r, but what is this? This is Q by epsilon naught. Now, how much is Q? How much is Q? What is the charge enclosed by the Gaussian sphere? Is the Gaussian sphere enclosing any charge? Do you see any charge? The charge is residing outside of the Gaussian sphere. Since the charge is outside of the Gaussian sphere, outside of the Gaussian sphere, Q will be equal to 0. So what will happen? E into 4 pi r square is equal to 0, which is nothing but E is equal to 0. So therefore, the net electric field inside of a shell is 0. It is very obvious because it doesn't enclose any charge inside. You are assuming it to be inside of that spherical shell where charges don't even reside. If there are no charges, no electric field will be experienced by any positive test charge. It won't experience any force inside because basically there is no net charge at all. It is 0. So that is how you arrive at the expression. I hope this class was clear and you enjoyed along with me, just like as much I enjoy teaching you. So yes, I'll come back with another video. We'll start the other chapters, take up more numericals from textbook and entrance examination numericals. Thank you so much for watching. Follow, like and subscribe to Kalike to watch more such videos. And yes, if you take care of electrostatics, electrostatics will take care of you.